Happy Philippine Eagle Week, everybody! Thank you for those of you who are joining us live right now on our Facebook page. Maraming salamat. You must be busy. It's, what is it today ba? Wednesday? Wednesday morning, probably in your office, just listening to us in the background. Thank you. We appreciate it. We're happy that you can celebrate Philippine Eagle Week with us. And we are excited to bring to you this special edition of Conversation on Conservation. Later on, we'll be talking about this interesting conservation method called translocation. But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you to our sponsors who made Philippine Eagle Week 2022 possible. Thank you for your support. To our co-presenters, we have Boysen Paints Philippines, we have San Roque Power Corporation, SM Lanang Premier, and of course our minor sponsors. We have FDC Utilities Inc., Energy Development Corporation, and our donors, we have Seda Abriza, Philippine Airlines, and Autoglass.ph. And I also want to just remind you that we have an exhibit ongoing at SM Lanang Premier at the Atrium. It features 35 milestones, as we are also celebrating the 35th anniversary of the foundation this year. So we're featuring the different accomplishments we've had in the past 3 decades, and we hope that you can check that out. And before we get to our conversation this morning, I am also pleased to share with everybody that on Monday, June 13, which is an extended celebration of the Philippine Eagle Week and also our Independence Day, we are releasing a Philippine Eagle in Sarangani Province. So it goes with our theme, which is Agilaya, Lasting Freedom for the Philippine Eagle. And this eagle is named Sarangani Eagle. And I'm going to share with you guys this morning a video on the preparations, basically everything, the work that was put in to prepare this eagle to be released back in its natural habitat. So this includes our education campaigns in the uplands to the checkups of this bird. So watch and enjoy.
Simula ako yun, upo ako ng 2016. Marami kasi ako nababalitaan dito ng mga illegal na mga layas, mga sa kahoy, cutting ng mga trees. Higpitan ko ngayon yung mga illegal na mga ganyan tramuhin. Kasi alam mo kung bakit? Kasi history po kasi yan. No? Diyan na nakikita ngayon na okay pang maitom, okay pang parish ng maitom. Kaya nga karamihan dito ngayon sa aming lugar, meron kaming ginagawang batas ngayon na meron kaming area na hindi talaga pwedeng galawin. Tapos meron din ako mga tao na pumupunta sa mga barangay na sinasabi na itong mga wild pieces na ito yung mga bawal. Kasi meron din kasi mga nasa area na barangay na hindi nila alam, no? Hindi nila alam yung mga mukha ng mga bawal. So meron ako mga lecturer ngayon na pupunta sa mga ibang areas ng mga barangay na medyo kwan pa yung forest.
Na-appreciate ko yung pagkakaroon ng Philippine Eagle dito sa Municipality of Maitom kasi bihira lang ito na nagkakaroon sa bawat municipality throughout the Philippines. Pride namin yung nagkaroon ng Philippine Eagle na ito. So at least because of this, lalo pang makilala ang Municipality of Maitom. Lalong-lalo na maalagaan natin ng maayos ang Philippine Eagle, itong Eagle na ito. Pagsasabihan yung lahat ng mga constituents dito sa Maitom na iwasan yung mananakit sa eagle na ito para manatili silang nandito sa ating kabukiran.
In line with the release of Salagbanok, the Philippine Eagle, on June 13, I would like to thank the community for being responsible in rescuing the Philippine Eagle. Of course, I'd like to commend also the effort of Senro Kiamba and the Environmental Conservation and Protection Center of Sarangani for facilitating the turnover to the Philippine Eagle Foundation. And of course, the Philippine Eagle Foundation for the successful rehabilitation of Salagbanok until it is fit to be released into the wild. And of course, the release is momentous in the sense that this would increase the level of awareness insofar as the importance of the Philippine Eagle. The presence of the Philippine Eagle symbolizes the successful effort of the government in the protection of the habitat. Now, what we need to do in this case is somehow to intensify our effort, because let's face it, we are facing various threats insofar as the existence of the Philippine Eagle. So what we need to do is to protect the habitat, and the efforts of the government is somehow, particularly Region 12, is timely. In that way, we can increase the population of Philippine Eagle.
So there, it really takes a village to take care of one Philippine eagle, and even more so in releasing it back to its natural habitat. So with that said, we want to thank on behalf of everybody at the PEF, DNR Region 12, LGU Maitum, LGU Sarangani, ECPC, and the communities of Upo and Tekulab in Maitum. And of course, our partners for funding this release, we have Sarangani Energy Corporation, Sigil Hydro, and Senro Kiamba and Penro Sarangani. So clearly, we could not do this by ourselves, just us, the PEF. We need the support of the LGU, the private companies, and the communities to make sure that this eagle will thrive in the forest. And so we are very excited to release Sarangani Eagle on Monday, that's June 13. Okay, so I would like to call on my colleague to join me in this conversation as we try to know more about this very interesting conservation technique. So let's all welcome Dr. Jason Ibanez, our Director for Research and Conservation, live from Maitum.
Yes, well,
Hello.
hello, Andy. Good morning. Hello, everyone from Maitum, where we're currently preparing for the release of Philippine Eagle, Sarangani Eagle. And
Yes.
yeah, and then we hope that you can also join us virtually, after the release to see
Yes.
what will happen.
Correct. So I know we're excited to bring the release to everybody wherever you may be. You just have to follow, like our Facebook page, and the soonest that we can upload that video of Sarangani Eagle flying off to the forest, we will share it with everybody. So why don't you tell us more, Muna Sir Jay, about how is it going there now, and are we all set na for Monday?
Yes, Andy, we had a very productive meeting with the provincial partners from the provincial and municipal governments yesterday. So the DNR was there, representatives from Maitum, as well as our partners from the ECPC, Senro Kiamba, and other partners. And the tasks and roles have been set.
Mm,
So we know
mm,
our functions practically.
mhm,
We arrived yesterday, and today our team is also in the release area, to prepare the release platform, plan with the community,
mhm,
and also the community is very excited because while we're also releasing the Philippine Eagle, this is also an opportunity for them to highlight bits of their culture also as part of the
mm.
uh, program. And of course, our forest guards are up and ready. As you've seen in the video, the DNR
Yeah.
and the PPF has trained them, and then 15 of our able-bodied men and women will be monitoring or keeping watch of Sarangani Eagle for at least six
Wow.
months, to make sure that
6 months.
he
Okay.
is healthy and safe.
Right.
So yeah, we're all
Yeah.
ready and pumped up.
Yes. Oo. I mean, it's also worth noting na yung mga locals, 'di ba? They really also volunteered to be forest guards. 'Di ba? They're the ones who step up and say, "Okay, we want to learn how to do this." Can you tell us more about
Yes.
that? So, mm.
Yes. And what's also exciting is that apparently the municipality of Maitum is a stronghold of Philippine Eagles. Ano. In 2017, we already did a release here, again with the same partners. The name of that eagle is Sarangani Pride. And then
Mm.
similarly, through the help of the forest guards of Barangay Batian and nearby barangays, we were able to keep him safe. And he has dispersed now away from his parents' territory. And we also know of at least two nesting pairs, no, Philippine eagles in Maitum. So,
Mm.
I believe this is a very welcome development and pride for people from Maitum, and
Yes.
they're
Oo.
really happy to support the conservation of eagles within their home, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's so important. There's a sense of ownership and that pride, 'di ba? That this is from here. This eagle is from here. It's, 'di ba? It's our neighbor. It's part of this community. Yung ganon.
Yes, exactly, and that's what we're trying to build and develop. Models of
Yeah.
sort of communities and Philippine eagles coexisting together,
Yes.
and then you know ach- both the community and the eagles achieving well-being through conservation.
Right. Right. Could you just tell us, or just briefly lang, a bit of a background on Sarangani Eagle? How this eagle came to us and how it is now.
Yeah, so Sarangani eagle is a rescued eagle. He was discovered by a group of locals, no,
Mm.
roaming the forests on last January 2021. So the bird was entangled in thorny vines, so they rescued
Mm.
it and then they turned it over to LGU Maitum, who in turn surrendered it. They alerted the DNR personnel in Kiamba, and this was happening during the pandemic. So
Yeah.
transactions such as this, no, transporting Philippine eagles would be
Mm.
a challenge. But fortunately, we pulled it off successfully again through close coordination with the local government and the DNR. In a matter of 2 days, no, after the bird was rescued, the Philippine eagle is already in the safety of our facility at the Philippine Eagle Center.
Wow.
So, as part of the regular assessment, we had the bird X-ray, but unfortunately, there's a marble
Mm.
projectile, no, lodged on its right shoulder, no, and it appears that the bird was shot using a Jolen gun. No? It's an improvised firearm,
Okay.
which is now very common in the uplands. So
Oh.
our vets had to operate, no, remove the marble projectile, and that was successful.
Mhm.
There's also an embedded air gun pellet, no, at the base
Wow.
of the neck
Okay.
of the Philippine Eagle. So apparently, these projectiles or the shooting happened maybe months ago because there were no longer
Ah,
entry
okay.
wounds. No,
Okay.
so
Healed na kumbaga yung
healed
wounds
na,
when it
yes,
was
healed na yung
ano.
wound. So it's really remarkable that the Philippine Eagle was able to survive this. We
Yeah.
did not bother to remove the air gun pellet because that would, I think, affect, no, yung safety and welfare ng bird, compromise his life. So the vets decided to leave it there.
Mhm.
Um, and then the bird underwent rehabilitation care in an isolated cage at the Philippine Eagle
Yeah.
Center. And yeah, fortunately, he's now ready to be back at his forest home. But of course, we need to make sure that he's safe after we do the
Yes.
release, and that's why we've been doing these preparatory activities.
So grabe no, it more than a year. This bird has been with us for more than a year. Yes, and then
Right. Yeah.
finally, mm,
Yes. Yeah. As you well know, yung responses ng birds natin vary.
correct.
We had birds like in just a matter of few months. No, they recovered, so we were able to release it back to the wild. But I think
Mm,
also a very important consideration is having access to resources for the purchase of a GPS and radio transmitters. And
yeah.
it took us a while really to find the resources to
Yes.
purchase a transmitter. As you well know, it's a very
Mm-mm.
expensive gadget. But fortunately, Sarangani Energy Corporation and Single Hydro committed. No,
Sponsored it. Yeah.
they sponsored it
Mm-mm.
because it's really very important to
Yes.
have the means to monitor so that we'll know whether our release is really successful or not, and of course
Yeah.
to make sure that the bird is safe while it's in the
Yes.
forest.
Yes. So, as you guys now know, it's not just a matter of releasing this bird back in the forest and leaving it there already on its own. It's so important to do monitoring after its release. And also, all the other pre release activities are so important and will contribute to the success rate of its release back in the forest. So, yes, I mean, we're grateful to our partners for making this possible, this release. Okay, I think we are also live now on YouTube, on our YouTube page, on our YouTube channel. And if you are on watching on our Facebook, please feel free to chat with us if you have any questions. Um, I don't know, is this Chris already here? I had to ask. uh, we're not quite sure yet, no. But I think we can just at least talk a bit about translocation. Sir Jay, what do you think? It is something that we've talked about this in the past, diba? Parang in passing, you're telling me about it, and I find it really fascinating. And this is actually something we haven't done yet, and but we are looking to trying it, right, for the Philippine Eagle. But yeah, maybe you can just at least give us like an overview or a definition of what translocation is, because it sounds really very technical for us non-scientists.
Yes, well, so what is conservation translocation? Well, we can lift a good definition or an authoritative definition from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. They're the authority on securing the welfare of threatened species. And according to them, conservation translocation is the intentional movement of organisms from one site for
Mhm.
release in another. And this is being done to bring about a conservation benefit, no? Not only to the
Mhm.
individual that's being transferred or translocated, but also at the population, species, or ecosystem level. So perhaps to provide a practical example, if we do this for the Philippine eagles, no, if we
Yeah.
capture young
Mm-mm.
or immature Philippine
Mm-mm.
eagles on Mindanao and
Uh-huh.
release them to a protected forest in Leyte to increase eagle numbers on that island, then we're practically doing conservation translocation because
Okay.
the
Mm-hmm.
transfer itself spares the immature eagles from Mindanao from getting shot or killed during natural dispersal, because that's our challenge. No, we have immature birds, no, those non-territorial eagles, when
Yes.
they leave their parents' territory and they roam around the forests of Mindanao, they're very vulnerable to shooting and hunting. No, these birds are very naive. They still don't know the dangers of
Yeah.
that humans can bring to them, so they're very susceptible to harm.
They're more
So if
vulnerable, di ba? Oo, that age
exactly,
group.
they're more vulnerable that
Mm-mm.
age group. In fact, out of the 13 no, Philippine eagles that we've rescued so far during the pandemic, 11 are actually juveniles and immatures.
Wow.
And our
Yeah.
data is saying that they're very vulnerable. So this is a
Tama.
a big waste on the reproductive potential of these young birds. So if you capture them from Mindanao, these dispersing birds, and then you transfer them in a vacant habitat, maybe in Leyte, or maybe in
Mm.
other parts of the Philippines, maybe in Luzon, then
But
you're
it isn't,
sparing.
yeah.
You're
Yeah,
sparing these animals from wasteful deaths. So that's how
right.
it benefits the species. But at the
Uh-huh.
same time, if you release birds repeatedly through time to say a vacant habitat, that would increase the population numbers of the species. So that
Yun.
benefits
Oo.
the species. So that's,
Yeah.
I think, a practical example. And also, if I
Oo.
may add, we can
Mm-mm.
also translocate captive bred birds.
I was gonna ask that. Yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah, so if we move and release eagles bred in captivity, again to
That's
vacant
also
forest in
transportation.
Leyte or also in Luzon.
Oo.
We think that
Oo.
there are vacant forests in Luzon, like in Banahaw, Mount Banahaw, and other places. Then that is also an example of conservation translocation.
Pero it cannot be just like any vacant forest. It has to have a historical ano like presence of eagle in that area, 'di ba? Parang tama ba 'yun? It
Yeah,
has to be a
exactly.
known eagle territory, I mean.
Yes. Well, conservation translocation is a very generic term, and it
Mhm.
encompasses, I think, two major types of releases. It can be releases in places where the eagles are found historically, no, yung mga
Mhm.
native sites niya.
Uh-huh.
It has been there since time immemorial. And you call that
Mhm.
reintroduction, okay? Especially in
Ah,
places where
okay.
the forest is already vacant,
All right.
meaning the eagles have lost its original population. But there's also a method where you can introduce animals in vacant places where they were not found historically. So that's introduction naman. But what's
Ah,
relevant for
okay.
us would be
Okay.
reintroductions.
Yes. So meaning yun nga, dapat in the past meron ng may sightings at least ganon, may record na
Exactly.
may eagle in that area
True.
to do it.
Yep.
Wow, that is so exciting. And I wish that Chris can join us anytime now because I'm sure he has a lot to share because our one of our longtime partners, the Peregrine Fund, has been doing this, di ba, Sir Jay? So we were hoping
Yes.
to
Yes.
chat with him this morning to tell us more about, their story with the California condor. But probably there's been some issues with the time difference. Baka may mga confusion lang. But yeah, but do you think this is something that we can get into like tayo for the Philippine Eagle? Is this something that we can dabble on?
Yeah. Well, we can do a feasibility study,
Mhm.
because that's a very important component of
Yeah.
a formal conservation translocation program. Do some preliminary assessments first, and I'm pleased to share that we're practically starting the first few stages of that. So we're looking at Leyte as a possible pilot reintroduction site.
Mhm.
And I'm sure if Chris would be joining us today, he would be reiterating the strong need, no, to do an assessment,
Yes.
including risk assessment. No? That's releasing or reintroducing or translocating Philippine eagles would really provide a practical net benefit. No,
Mm-mm.
looking at risk is very important. For example, risk to the source population. If we're
Mm-mm.
gonna get birds from the wild in Mindanao, will it not affect the population naman on Mindanao? And then once the bird gets released
Yes, tama.
in
Mm-mm.
Leyte, will are how sure are we that the birds will survive? No,
Or will
including
breed there.
will breed. Yeah. So
Oo.
these are information that needs to be assessed, and they're part of the formal feasibility study as recommended or as mandated by an international guideline. No,
Oo.
the IUCN has a guideline on they have guidelines on the reintroduction of threatened species, and that's basically the Bible, no, for starting a conservation transportation program, and that's a very important reference also for us.
Yes, yes. Hello, Cram D Nozmid. We have a question from him. With the recent captive breeding of Philippine eagles, how many chicks has been produced in your facility in Mindanao?
Yes, so we have produced 29 Philippine Eagles already in captivity. And this proves that, conservation breeding can really work for our
Mm-mm.
national bird. I think the next step would be maximizing reproduction among our captive
Yes,
birds, and then
that's true.
releasing a fair amount of birds, no captive bred birds, to supplement the releases or translocation of Philippine eagles naman, uh, captured
Oo.
or taken from the wild.
So with my question earlier, parang we can't get to that technique yet until like we're really producing enough for, I mean, at least for captive breeding, for captive bred eagles to
Exactly.
be translocated, there has to be like how many are we talking about here, Sir Jay? Na parang na
Well,
eagles na
well, to put
ideal for
the
okay.
our conservation breeding program in the right context, I think, well, the first stages, or the first question that we really wanted to ask before is, can we breed them in captivity? And we fairly answered
Yes,
that. No, we have
yes,
proven that we can breed them in captivity. In the past, we thought that they thought that you couldn't breed the eagles in captivity, but we did that, and we did it successfully with 29 eagles. So the next exciting step would be to breed as many birds as possible, no, perhaps enough birds so that we can release two or more birds every year, to pump up our release program.
okay. Thank you for that, Sir Jay. I think Chris is already here. Okay,
Yes.
so glad he made it. Okay, let me just introduce to everybody. My gosh, I'm so happy that Chris is here.
Me too.
uh, our, our special guest for this edition of Conversation on Conservation to tell us more about translocation. We have with us uh, our guest, Chris Parish, who was raised in a small farming ranching and oil town in South Central California in the southern San Joaquin Valley. After a brief yet impactful introduction to the wildlife of the desert foothills, mostly through hunting and fishing, he moved on to further his education at Northern Arizona University on an athletic scholarship, obtaining a BS in biology with emphasis on fish and wildlife management. Through time, education, and reflection of the vast gap between the people of the land and conservation oriented groups, such as academics, scientists, it became obvious that he would strive to bridge the gap between the people of the lands and the scientific management communities in efforts to build intentional and successful conservation products. After working for the Arizona Game and Fish Department as a wildlife biologist, for the first 5 years of his wildlife career, he moved to the private sector and has served as the Condor Program Director for the Peregrine Fund for nearly 2 decades, continuing his passion for both fieldwork and converting foundational scientific contributions to conservation by engaging and uniting partners in recovery efforts in Arizona and Utah. Since 2012, he has been in pursuit of a PhD at Northern Arizona University and also promoted to Director for Global Conservation for the Peregrine Fund with a primary focus on recovery programs for Aplomado falcons, California condors, and the establishment of the North American Non-Lead Partnership. As of October 7, 2021, Chris was promoted to President CEO of the Peregrine Fund and is also now one of the trustees of the Philippine Eagle Foundation. Chris and his wife Ellen have two beautiful daughters, Emma and Anna, who are now grown and entering into their careers, taking with them the love and passion of the outdoors and conservation. Please help me welcome to the conversation Dr. Chris Parish.
Hello, hello. Oh, I'm so glad I'm thank you for the note on Messenger, Jason. I ended up having to come down to Arizona, and so I'm another hour in a different time zone, and I nearly missed you all. I'm
Oh,
so sorry to be late.
doesn't matter anymore at this point, Chris. We're just so happy that you made it.
You bet. You bet.
So happy
It's-
you're here. We're excited for this conversation with you.
you
So
bet.
let's begin. How about you tell
Okay.
us more about what you guys at the Peregrine Fund have been doing for the California condor and why you did the translocation method for these birds?
You bet, and I imagine it's the same. And what I'm learning with more and more species around the world, the problems are nearly always the same. Some abrupt change or a long coming change that the species can't adapt to quickly enough because of the rapid changes in the environment. And I think that's what we saw with the California condor. And so their species has been in decline since the end of the last ice age, but the precipitous decline occurred in the last 150 to 200 years. And so, of course, that always opens you up to beg the question of, well, is it something we're doing? And there were a lot of theories early on as to why the condor numbers had declined. But really, they didn't have enough data to really answer the question completely. And so by developing a captive breeding program and then having enough birds to reintroduce to their historical habitats and then monitoring them extensively, until that happened, we really couldn't confirm what the problems really were. And now we have a much better idea of not only what the problems that maybe led to their near extinction, but also what it will take to create a self-sustaining population.
Wow. So there really has to be a lot of course, research and gathering all of this information about this bird before you even can consider doing a technique or a method like translocation.
Absolutely. And for this, you have to be careful with the definitions, of course. And if they were their historical range, they call it a reintroduction instead of a translocation. But it really, I think the question, however, with how rapidly environments are changing, it really behooves us to challenge ourselves to really understanding as much as you can about a species to know where they might be able to survive, because in some cases the habitats are so dramatically changed that you might have to consider translocation in its true definition. And so there were 22 individual California condors in 1982. 22 left. 22. And today, luckily, because of all of the collaboration and all the folks that are involved in this, today we have over 500.
Oh my goodness.
Wow, that's a success story, Chris. Yeah.
It's in the making. It's in the making, as you well know.
Well, Andy, I what Chris said about finally deciding to intervene with this very limited data. I'm just curious to know, Chris, so what prompted the decision? Like, can you tell us more about the process of finally deciding to, well, I believe you took the birds out from the wild and then do the conservation breeding, how the decision making happened, and what are the preparations for this? I can imagine that it's a very big and very exhaustive preparation. So could you tell us more about the process?
I will, and I'll just tell you right off hand that the it's secondhand information, because this was happening when I was a young man, and I was actually in high school when this was occurring. And so, and I grew up in the southern San Joaquin Valley, which is right there at the edge of the condor's historic range and where the last birds were captured. So there was tremendous debate at the time. There were some who said that the condor was on its natural path of extinction, and that they should be, and there were some, and these were environmental groups that were saying that. And so there was a huge divide and a huge debate at the time in the 80s. And they said, no, they should let them go with distinction, let them go. No, what did it say? Let them go with dignity. They said, let them go with dignity. And then others said, no, we can't do that, because we believe that we have had something to do with their precipitous decline. And therefore we are obliged to go and figure out what it is. And we can't let them go forever. So the good news is, regardless of who was right or wrong, when we look back with history now, the important thing is we have so much data now, and because we track the birds so intently, as you can see by the transmitters and the wing tags on the birds, now we have a better understanding of the general biology of the condor, and we can now conclusively say that the number one cause of mortality is a preventable cause of mortality, and it's lead poisoning, and lead poisoning from sources of ammunition and things like that, that we do have control over. We can prevent that, and now we're in the process of preventing that. So it was a huge debate in the early stages, and there were big questions. Could these birds be bred in captivity? And of course there are great success stories like that of the peregrine falcon, which can be produced at great scale, at high enough numbers to reestablish their populations. But that was a big question. And I remember as a kid at that same time, I remember in the zoos when the first panda bear was produced in captivity, and that was a huge success story. And it didn't really truly, I didn't truly understand it as a young person, and now I understand it. But the San Diego Zoo and the Los Angeles Zoo, really, that's where it all began. And then in 1993, the Peregrine Fund was asked to come on to the California Condor Recovery Program and become one of the captive breeding facilities, and also man one of the captive breeding, the release sites in northern Arizona and southern Utah. And so that was a really truncated story of how that happened. But the last bird was captured Easter Sunday, 1987, and then that bird was later released back to the wild. And so so as a testament of the resiliency of a species, think about that for a moment. This species, the condor, is so tough, and vultures have to be tough. They live a very different life than some of the predators we work with. But that bird was released back to the wild, and it continued to pair and produce young in the wild after being in captivity for over 12 years. I think that bird was in captivity, maybe even longer. So anyway, thankfully for us, that we've come to understand that, yes, in fact, we can prevent their extinction, and it wasn't a quote unquote natural extinction. This is something we had a hand in. And for me as a hunter, I am so grateful that we were able to do that and learn and see that we can have a healthy population out there. And it's evident by the reintroduction today.
That is such a fascinating story, Chris. But could you tell us more about what did you guys do when you found out that it was lead poisoning, the primary cause of the decline? So is this something, are the efforts still ongoing until now?
We're absolutely. So I'll just give you now, just to make sure I'm not misrepresenting, I'll just give you the history that I've had in my experience with the release programs in Arizona and Utah, which are managed by the Peregrine Fund. We do it, of course, as a contractor in essence. It's not a paid contractor, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the state wildlife management agencies, they actually have the responsibility of seeing that the birds are maintained and managed and recovered. We just do the work. And then as a nonprofit, we raise a large percentage of the funds that we use to do the work. So we started releasing birds in 1996. And it was the first 6 birds were released December 12, 1996. And then every year after that, we began releasing more and more birds, about 10 or 12 birds per year. And so really, it wasn't until about 5 years in of releasing birds that we had an old enough population, because the condor is a long-lived species and they're not sexually mature until 8 years of age. And so they weren't really occupying the space and the habitat the way that an established population would for years down the line. So it took us that many years. So we didn't really see lead poisoning pop up in instances of lead exposure or lead caused mortality until 2000. And then by 2002, so now we're 6 years into the program, we have birds that are now approaching breeding age. They're out there foraging on a landscape more naturally, if I could use that term again. Then they're really now showing us what it looks like for a condor navigating the landscape and living off of the land. And that's when you get a more true picture of how these birds are truly, what's affecting them and what is not. And so by the early 2000s, it was apparent that we were seeing annual cycles of lead poisoning, where the lead poisoning would peak in the population and then it would decline again. And it was coincided with our deer hunting season there. and it's right
Okay.
next to the release area. And so again, many of us, having the Peregrine Fund founded by falconers, one of the oldest forms of hunting on in history, many of us are lifelong hunters, and so we understood the relationship between, well, we use lead for the center fire rifle bullets that we use for hunting deer. Perhaps there's a link. And this was very well established with waterfowl in the US and Canada and around the world, because lead shot caused waterfowl issues. So we had some experience with that, but we didn't have the full picture yet. So we started asking more questions of how much lead can there possibly be in a single carcass from a single shot from a high-powered rifle.
Yeah.
And so we did those studies to quantify the rates of fragmentation, the seasonality of exposure, and then we began working with the hunting community through the wildlife management agencies who manage hunting, and that's how we got the information out there. So once again, the model is perfect. Still, if you have the foundational science and you do the work in the field and you have some success in reestablishing populations by studying them intensively, you can better understand the greater system.
Right.
And that's what I think is something that is missed whenever people talk about single species recovery programs. They tend to lose the fact that it's not just about the one species. When you study one piece of a greater system, you learn more about the greater system. But it's what you do with what you learn that truly makes it conservation. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Wow.
Is that I, as a hunter, and for my fellow hunters, learned about the relationship between hunting, which we've done for generations, and how that could negatively affect some species, but most importantly, how we can change our behaviors to still continue our hunting and not have it impact the condor and bald eagles and golden eagles, all the other species. So as you can see, I know I'm terribly animated about this because it's exciting, because it brings it brings the as you read in my bio, it brings my coming from the people of the land, working, the farmers, the hunters, the ranchers. It brings that and conservation together, which is just couldn't be more perfect for my interests.
Yeah, well, thanks really for that, Chris. No, this is a very inspiring story. And, Andy, while Chris was describing his experience, I can't help but to, find things that also resonate with the work that we do at the Philippine Eagle Foundation.
It all sounds
Chris,
familiar.
spoke eloquently about the value of science and monitoring these birds. If I may share, Chris, and I'm sure you already know this. No, after we've learned to do telemetry from you guys, we also started putting GPS trackers on the birds. And after putting transmitters on adult birds and immature birds, that's when we found out that Philippine eagles are actually very vulnerable to accidental and retaliatory trapping. We didn't know that before, but because of actively monitoring these birds, we now know that immature birds are very vulnerable. Like recently, 11 out of 13 Philippine eagles that we've rescued during the pandemic are actually immature birds, and again, they're very vulnerable. And as you again reiterated the value of transforming this information to action. So we're very happy to work with, of course, the government and the indigenous peoples. It's the indigenous peoples who are actually setting up the traps in the wild. So through our culture-based conservation program, we have our forest guard that engages IPs in monitoring the eagles. And then also part of their job is voluntarily removing native traps in the wild. No, it's a work in progress, but yes, thanks for sharing that, and I hope it also inspires other conservation practitioners to really consider this as models for doing conservation work.
And I understand, Chris, every year the Peregrine Fund is releasing California condors every year, right? Every September, is that correct?
Yes. Every September, usually the third Saturday in September, just so we can create some regularity, because so many people, we had over 1,000 people out there prior to the pandemic that would come out to the middle. I mean, it's a 4-hour drive from the Phoenix area, which is our big city, 4 hours to drive up there. But yeah, we continue to release birds into that population, both to replace those that are lost, but really just to really boost the population so that when normal processes of mortality happen, we're giving them a boost because it takes that long to build that population up. And yeah, you can see here from the release, you can see it on, we live stream it every year now.
Yeah.
So that even if you can't come and visit, you can watch
Yeah.
online. But that's, I think, one of the other things that's so exciting about this day and age with all the technology that we have, not only like Jason said about the transmitters on the birds, but also being able to put this out there for the world to see that here's a species that one time we only had 22 of. And now in the Arizona population alone, we have over 110. And we've had 41, I think over 40 young produced in the wild. And we now have some of the F2 generation producing their own young. And so it really is work. And so it makes conservation science and the act of conservation really available to the masses to see that story. And the other part of it too, as you well know, Jason, working with the indigenous peoples in the different regions of all the different species that we work with globally, it really is imperative that we work with people. We don't come in and tell people what they need to do because they have their livelihoods at stake.
Yes, that's true.
I think that's and that's what's unique about this. Here's one of the world's most endangered species, and they are accessible. Not only the story about what has been done, but it's people can go to the Grand Canyon and see that and meet the biologists in the field doing the work and realize too, for some of those young people who may aspire to become biologists, I always say it about myself. If I can become a biologist, anybody can. It's really a wonderful part of it. And we all have conservation in our histories, even if it's not about conservation of wildlife. We all have conservation. We too are a species honed by evolution and generation from generation, and we know what it means to maintain our spaces and our livelihoods. And the same can be said for those species. And when we can link that together, now we have conservation.
Yes.
Yes, totally agree, Chris. It's really important for the conservation to be inclusive. And speaking of inclusivity, can you also share perhaps examples of how the local community has been supporting your work or participating directly in your work? Because I think that can also be an inspiration to many of our listeners who are also from local communities.
You bet. So the story about the lead poisoning on the Kaibab Plateau, which is a very famous plateau that one of our early conservation-minded politicians and Theodore Roosevelt, he actually set aside some of that land early on to set it aside for conservation. But he was a hunter too, and so it's really interesting that here we are all these years later. And the very deer that were protected from hunting for a brief time, they responded, and now they're doing so well that we can hunt them again. And the very species that was there following us and other predators, the condor, is back in the same landscape. And then we see lead poisoning pop up as a problem. And we engaged with the wildlife management agencies who manage hunting, Arizona Game and Fish, and Utah Division of Natural Resources. They then took our basic science and shared it with the hunters and asked for their voluntary support to switch to non-lead ammunition or remove the remains of animals that had been shot with lead. And I'm really proud to say that for the last 12 years, the deer hunters on the Kaibab Plateau, as one example, there's about 2,000 hunters per year. We've maintained 87% annual voluntary support of either using non-lead or removing lead from the field when they use lead. So that is a small scale success, and it's just the deer hunters now, but that's because that's where we started the program. Now, the North American Non-Lead Partnership, we're trying to expand that message to across the nation and get people to understand that it doesn't just affect condors. It could also negatively affect other species, and more science is showing that, yes, in fact, it is true. It is the key here, though, is not who is doing it. The key here is that it is preventable. And if you engage people in the right way, you can inspire them to make change without necessarily changing laws or I mean, that's our hope, is that we as a society can manage this ourselves if we digest the science, the
Yes.
the the bits of science that we can learn about our behaviors, how we can improve our behavior on a landscape and still have it benefit wildlife. And that's the thing. One of the things I'm most excited about is that's where you transition science into conservation, and
Yeah.
science alone is necessary and it is a
Mm.
foundation. But if you
Yes.
make it conservation, and how you make it conservation has more to do with the success than the logic or the science of it. And that's really
Mhm.
tough for some people to gather, because it's simply, I always
Yeah.
use the example of, I understand the equation for a human body and how not to carry excess weight, like don't eat as much,
Mm.
but I still struggle with that, right? I'm heavier than I
Don't we
should.
all?
But really, I mean, it's a simple science, is it not? It's very
Mm.
simple. But
Yes.
we have to change habits. We have to
Mm.
create new
Exactly.
habits. We have to
Exactly.
pay attention to the calories, and I think that's the same for conservation.
Yes.
And not everybody cares about a vulture or an eagle, or but you know
Exactly.
what? I think I think they do. It's just not on their minds, and
Yet.
you
Mm.
can put it
Yeah.
in their minds in very
Yes.
different ways. You can put it in their mind because you're saying you're doing something bad, or you can say we need your help, wildlife needs your help, and here's the story, and here's what you can do. So that's, to me, the
Yes.
exciting part about conservation.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I don't even know where to begin with all the things that you said. I mean, I am not a biologist, actually, Chris, but I feel like as a communications graduate, I feel like there's anyone can pitch in really, and that's what makes conservation inclusive. As you've said, it's really a matter about influencing behaviors and choices, and right. I mean, they may not. We may think that they don't care about a certain species, but
Mm.
maybe just because it hasn't been in their awareness or consciousness yet. But once you bring it to them, then there's a chance that they can make the right choices and commit and take action with everybody. Yeah. So
You
I
know,
love that.
and it's apparent to me globally. Why do we, and have we for so many
Mm.
generations around the world, why do we feed pigeons in city centers? We
Yeah.
like to be a part of
Mm,
wildlife, so it's there. We
mm.
just have, I
The
think
interest
I
is
think
there. Yeah.
also there's the potential in our history in conservation for a lot of mightier than thou speaking down to the common people. And I say this very carefully because I feel like I come from the land. I come from the people who work the land. My
Mm,
ancestors were the people, they were the farmers. And so when you have somebody from a university and you have somebody who's working the land, there's already a challenge in communicating.
right.
But if you can figure out how to overcome that challenge, and you can package conservation or ecosystem health in a way that's relatable to them, I guarantee you have more in common
Yeah.
than you don't.
Important thing is
Yes.
it will resonate to more people. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
really like it, Chris, when you were mentioning about our love or connection to
Yes.
biodiversity or life as something innate, like the way that we invest on feeding pigeons. It reminded me of Sir Dr. Edward Wilson's idea of biophilia. I'm also a big fan of that. Like we have it innately in us, but we need to wake that up. No, we need to
Yes.
awake that innate tendency in people. And
Yes.
again, I totally agree. Your idea of clear communication, the right communication and messages can potentially ignite that
Yes.
Yeah.
connection and attachment to biodiversity.
Needs
Yeah,
to resonate with the people. Yeah.
look at how effective animated movies are in shaping behavior culturally globally now, right? I
Yeah.
mean, with kids that can see now these cartoons, and people talk about these things, and those things shape society so quickly. Now we just need to figure out how to package conservation and really market it like it's a product. Meaning, not that we need to brainwash people. We just need to figure out how to package it so it's consumable in today's fast-paced, highly technological world
Right.
in such a way that they say, hey, yes, our computers, I mean, this being able to talk with you folks, I mean, this is
Exactly.
phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
I know.
It's great, but we can use those new tools. And I'm afraid most of us in science and biology, we're not great at doing that. So we have to learn how to be better.
That's where we come in.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's our contribution. But I just want to go back to the annual release that you guys are doing, because we don't get to do it annually in our case here at the PEF, but it's something that we've been doing quite frequently in the recent years, since we rescued a number of birds at the start of the pandemic. But maybe you can just, because our audience is familiar with how our release looks like. Typically, it's, the eagle is in a kennel, which we open and it just immediately flies off. But in this case, it looks different. Could you
Yes.
tell us more about this setup?
You bet. And I'll tell you that the release this year will be September 24th. If I have the date right, it's a Saturday at 11 a.m. GMT -7. So you'll be able to view on YouTube. And of course, it'll be recorded so you can watch it afterwards. So what we do, this is an acclimation pin. And so we have a holding pin that's very large, like 5 times this size, that's way back away from where the public can see. And we put the birds there first when they come from the breeding facilities so that they can establish a cohort. Once we've monitored the birds and we decide which ones are going to be released first, then we make a sub-cohort. The sub-cohort is placed into this release pen, and then they spend a couple of weeks there. And there they can see the free-flying birds coming and going, as you see on top of the pin there. And they can see the free-flying birds feeding. So under the cover of darkness at night, right out on the rocks that you see to the left there, just outside of the pin, we'll put carcasses there at night under the cover of darkness, so that the next day the free-flying birds come in and the birds within the pen can see them. And then finally, after a countdown usually of the people who are there locally, then we open up the door remotely. So there's no humans involved that the birds can see. We open up the pin, and when we open the pin, and you can see the doors in the upper right-hand corner, there's a top door in the roof and a front door in the front end, and the birds are able to leave either by the ground by walking out, or they can fly out of the top door. And so pretty much it's what we refer to as a soft release. The birds are able to go, they're able to go on their terms. And it's pretty spectacular. And the responses that we see from people who are both online and the people that are down below with spotting scopes a mile away, people can see them, and the oohs and the ahs from the crowd it was phenomenal.
I mean, releases are really charismatic, even for us. It's probably the most viewed video that we have online. Any eagle that they find flying off, and whenever we set free an eagle, it always gets the public's interest and attention. And yeah, I just hope that we could do it live the way you guys do. We have a problem with our internet here too, so we just end up showing a recorded video. But anyway, so I remember, Sergey, you mentioned that to me before about the difference of soft release. So and hard release, and what we're doing is hard releases, right? Is that correct?
Yes,
Sergey,
basically, yes. So we're releasing
release.
our rehabilitated birds. No, that's our experience so far, Chris. No, again, during the pandemic, we've released 5 rehabilitated eagles, and all of these are hard release, meaning they were freed from their kennel or transport box. I remember my first training with your teammates in Panama. Now we released a harpy eagle from a kennel box, and that's one of the protocols we use also. And again, going back to your release, Chris. So the birds that you're releasing are actually captive bred, right? These are captive bred birds.
Oh, yeah.
That's correct. That's correct.
And I'm just curious, how many breeding pairs or breeding birds do we have right now in captivity that you guys work with? How many, in terms of numbers, how many birds are you working
I think
with?
we have, boy, and I may get this wrong because I'm still not as familiar with the entirety of it, but we produced, I believe, 11 young this year, and I think we have 15 or 16 pairs. at our facility in Idaho. So we have over a dozen pairs in Idaho in captivity producing, and we produced 11 young this year. And so
Wow.
those young and the young from the Oregon Zoo, the San Diego's Wild Animal Park. I think they changed their name, and I keep getting it wrong. But the old San Diego Wild Animal Park, now it's San Diego Zoo Global, I believe, and then the Los Angeles Zoo. Those are the major producers, and all of the young are depending upon their genetic variability. That's how finely tuned this is. They determine where the progeny are best placed in the wild to make sure that we have maximum genetic diversity in all the release sites, because the Arizona release site is only one of them. They also have release sites in California that are run by different groups there, from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to Ventana Wilderness Society to Pinnacles National Park. So there's a lot of people involved in this. And I think that's another one that I read in the questions before. What are the keys to success? Collaborations. Nobody can do this by themselves, both from a funding standpoint or from the reach that you have to do this. It takes everything from the individual community members to community groups and different agencies. And it takes a village. It truly does, and beyond.
True. Exactly. I love how you just echoed those things I also said earlier, actually, that it does take a village to in our case, from rescue rehabilitation until we finally release it. And even after releasing it, to make sure that it's safe, it takes the different stakeholders to work together. So I think we've come towards the end of our conversation. That happened so fast.
Well,
I know. I just feel like, what? It's been an hour. I can't believe it. I didn't even notice. So maybe you can leave us, Chris, with some tips, for our release program in the future. Anything you'd like to share with us for that?
Well, I think I am an eternal optimist, and I think all of us who work in conservation, we probably must be optimists, right? Because there's so many challenges out there, and there's a difference between hope and action, and hope with action, though, equals very positive things. So I would say keep the hope, keep the faith, and keep that dogged determination, both to do the work and to be able to translate the work to the public. Because if we can't translate the results of our science and turn it into conservation, then we're not doing the whole package. So we have to keep that faith and that determination to make it happen.
Oh my goodness. I needed to hear that. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. Anything from you, Vijay?
Well, thank you again, Chris. I know you're very busy, but you found time to join us. The wisdom that you've imparted, the experience, is really very important to us. As Andy mentioned, we're at the stage of exploring possible releases of Philippine eagles in vacant habitats. We will surely, bother you more to get your insights on this program. Especially the technical side, and then helping us, of course, lobby this program with our own national government. So please expect us to knock on your doors pretty soon. Yes, and we look forward to having you here in the Philippines, hopefully in the near future.
Please visit us.
You bet. Absolutely. Looking forward to it. I have so much to learn from you all.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for sharing your time with us and your energy. We needed that boost as well.
You bet. Thank you.
We have a long way to go, and we hope that soon we can also accomplish what you've accomplished with the California Condor for the Philippine Eagle. So thank you again for your time, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Ayun. Grabe. Na-overwhelmed.
Yeah, that was a...
Yes,
that was a very nice conversation, Andy. Yeah.
Yes. So for those of you who are not able to join us live, you can watch this later on. This is going to be recorded. You can watch it on our Facebook page. And thank you also, Sir Jay. I know, we're all very busy right now because it's Philippine Eagle Week, and we have a release on Monday. We have our PEF Talks on Friday. Baka gusto mo silang i-invite, Sir Jay, para sa talks nyo ni Dr. Ternura.
Yeah, so for those of you who are based in Davao, no, we'll be having two talks on Friday, June 10, afternoon at SM Lanang Premiere. The first talk would be about the recent threats to Philippine Eagles, why we should do something about shooting, trapping, and hunting. It's hurting the population, and why we should do it now. And then the second talk would be about the threats of avian flu, as well as exotic diseases to our not only our captive birds but also wild birds. So please join us if you can at again at SM Lanang Premiere, afternoon of June 10,
4 p.m. That's at 4 p.m.
4 p.m.
So, yeah, so we have Sergey there. We have Dr. Emilia Ternura, who's from UPLB College of Veterinary Medicine, right? So they're both going to be tackling these two main threats that we would like to highlight this Philippine Eagle Week. And of course, if you have questions, we can entertain them right then and there after their talk. So I hope you can join us. And of course, sorry, I mixed that up. It's 3 p.m. 4 p.m. is our recognition program for our partner forest guards naman. Not just in Davao City, but we will acknowledge all of our partner communities who are in our forest guarding program. That's all happening on Friday at SM Lanang Premiere. And on Saturday also, let's invite them for Learn with Malaya naman, no? Bring your kids, your whole family, and we will do our Learn with Malaya activity at the atrium. We have storytelling, we have games, and please come in your eagle costume. We have prizes for the kids and there, or adults also, if you feel like it. Why not? We can give you, we'll give you treats and prizes and free entrance to the center if you're in your eagle costume. So we'll see you there at SM Lana Premiere, and like and follow us on Facebook for more updates for this Philippine Eagle Week celebration. Okay, so just before we wrap up, again, I just want to quickly say thanks to all of our sponsors for making this episode of Conversation on Conservation possible. We have San Roque Power Corporation, we have Boys and Paints, we have SM Lanang Premier, and then we have our minor sponsors, FBC Utilities Inc., Energy Development Corporation, and our donors, Seda Abriza, Philippine Airlines, and Autoglass.ph. Maraming salamat, and also to our many other sponsors who have given their support. Maraming salamat. We will be saying thanks to all of you on our Facebook page as well. So, happy Philippine Eagle Week again to everybody. Hashtag Agilaya, lasting freedom for the Philippine Eagle. Maraming salamat, Sergey, Chris. Bye.
Bye everyone, and happy Philippine Eagle Week. Bye Chris. See you soon.
Bye bye.